Stories are one of the oldest form of communication for humans. Storytelling is a very critical art to provide information in the proper way. And story maps are the newer form of stories that helps the audience to not only see the information and hear the information, but also they can see them on a map. So we are going to discuss the storytelling concept as well as kind of getting more into the story maps. Story maps are a product from ESRI or ESRI, and they are web-based applications that we are going to use to create our own story maps. So quick review, we are going to conceptualize story maps in GIS. We are going to demonstrate applications maps in storytelling and implement ways to create story maps. So kind of recap, stories are memorable, compelling, impactful. And because they put people in a receptive frame of mind, they are going to be very effective. Character-driven stories trigger the production of oxytocin, and it's a neurochemical that makes the feeling that people can cooperate more. And then there's a research by Stanford University that has found story-driven content are usually raised twice as much money as content driven purely by statistics. So just put those same exact content. One is the form of story-driven content. One is just facts based on the numbers. That story is going to create twice as much monetary result. For example, we are seeking for fundraising. That is very important. I'm thinking about the human brain. We have left and right brain. So our left brain is logical, analytical, objective part, and the right brain are intuitive, thoughtful, subjective. And story maps engage both sides of our brains because not only we see visuals and interactions, but also we see maps, information. So there is a mixture of both sides kind of working together and helps people or audience engage with the content in the form of story maps. And content with visuals receive 90% more views than the regular content. So people respond powerful to the visual simulation. And thinking about maps, which are well adopted for human, they are also universally appealing because they are providing a lot of information. At the same time, they carry some form of stories related to them. So engage the mind, delight the eye, and tap the power of maps with story maps. That's basically what we are going to do. We are going to talk about story maps, and then we're going to see how we can create our own story maps. Because story maps are web-based applications, there is no configuration needed. The only thing you need to get is the ArcGIS online license. And then on top of that, the story maps comes with a bunch of other applications. Story maps incorporate the builder function. So basically, you don't have to develop anything. The builder gives you the capability of creating content and then converting that to a web-based application. But why story maps are still the point of our discussions? Because they're free. You can even get a free version of the story maps. If you create a publicly or public account for ArcGIS Online, you can access to the story maps. There's a little bit difference in terms of functionalities, but overall you can get a lot of information. You can get a lot of functionalities with the free version as well. And there is no high or complex learning curve. So you can easily ask anyone to learn about story maps, and believe it or not, in a matter of maybe even minutes, they are going to be very in-depth into making story maps. So I'm just going to talk about the storytelling structure, and that's called the CUES structure. And what you need to always keep in mind when you are making your stories and story maps is that first think about your audience. Who is your audience? So connect with your audience. Even before building your story maps, you need to know what type of audience you're going to get. So basically you pick the right content, you pick the right visual for that type of audience. You want to lure people in. You want to just start with the very enticing, appealing information, code, something very attractive. So people right at the beginning, they are attached to following your story. You wanted to take into account user experience that can support your story, so that basically makes it more personalized, more connectable. So even though your story map or story is going to be related to something that your audience may not be familiar, but still you can bring some content or some personal information from other platforms that they can feel related. The story maps and visuals you are going to create should be, and I would say must be, easy to read, which means that you need to do your task of simplifying the maps. You want to create visuals, charts, graphics that are simple to read, simple to understand. You don't want your audience to look at your story map and say, okay, I can't really make sense out of it. So where that information came from, or what is the meaning of that variable? What is the meaning of that color? You want to create simple and easy to read graphics. And finally, strive for simplicity, right? So you want to simplify things. You don't want to overcomplicate it by adding all those elements, all those gauges, all those pieces of information. Then you are going to basically lose the connection with your audience. And that is going to, of course, come right at the end, and you can just repeat that process and get to the point that your stories or story maps are very successful. So there is a link for reading a story map about story maps. If we can open that up, that is going to take you to the story maps that is created by ESRI. But also we want to just talk about our perspective of the story map. So think about 9 steps to create storytelling. That is created by Alan Carroll, ESRI Story Maps team, and the link is provided as well. First step is start with the bang. We already have talked about CUES structure. This is a little bit different perspective. You want to add a hero. In many cases, the hero could be a person in the organization. It could be employee, it could be a group of people, it could be someone in the society. So that is going to be kind of make it relatable and customizable. Give your story a rhythm. So you don't want to just jump into different branches. You want to keep that logical flow, gradually provide information, allow your audience to digest the information. You want to create a little world, right? You want to have the map. If story map does not have a map in it, that is not a story map. Definitely, there are different types of audiences. Based on that, you are going to pick the right content. You want to create the right visuals. So one size does not fit all, right? So you want to make sure that, okay, I can create different versions of story maps, one for public view, one for experts, one for possibly kids. So there could be different versions of the same content. And you can have this different perspectives. Sometimes you need to think big, sometimes you need to think small, and you just need to combine these in a way that is going to make it much more appealing for your audience. And definitely, sometimes you want to create passive maps. There is no interaction. Sometimes you want to create active maps. So people, when they open the story maps, they can click on different parts of the map to get information. And so for some maps, you can just create a visual, for example, export the image of the map and include that. Still the map, but it's not interactive. And definitely you want to keep the story map short and simple. and definitely something positive at the end, call to action, would makes it much more useful and helps decision-making process. And if you think about the story map anatomy, when you open the story map, you're going to see different sections, and this could be different when you actually watch the video because of course some of the updates, but basically you have an area, you add your content, main content, visuals, headers, you can add maps, then you can have some slide bar content. It could be some information complementing that map, right? You can have your legend or some links. You can have some headers here. You can include video as well. So everything, any type of media could be included or embedded within the story maps. And you can also browse through the sample of the story maps based on different types or subject, industry, format, author. And the reason you can take advantage of that is that there are so many types or so many good story maps that you can possibly get ideas from, and then that is going to be very helpful in many cases. If you are focused on a specific industry, environmental, for example, industry, or retail stories, you want to find those type of stories, see what other people are talking about. Still, you have your own creativity, but you can see how those stories are being made. And you can then start building your first story map. Basically go log into ArcGIS Online, load the story maps, and then start building your story maps. There are two ways you can create story maps. One is from scratch. Basically, there's a template you pick and start building your story maps. You add your content and then publish your story maps. The second one would be if you have an existing map, you build your story maps on top of that map. Basically, you create, you use the web app builder, and then you build the story maps based on an existing map. So there are two different ways. Both would be effective in different ways. So you pick the right one based on the scenario. And then after identifying your target audience, define your key takeaways, kind of write these steps down for yourself. Create a content inventory. So where maybe a folder on your computer or cloud that you store all of the information, all of the maps, all of the images, videos, or links to them. You just put them right there and then draft your outline and finally start building your story map. And there is another way of doing that, is just kind of creating a work in progress story maps. And as you go, as you look at the preview of story maps, you make some changes, you edit, add, remove content. So this was a very quick review of story maps, and we are going to discuss ways that you can possibly take advantage of the storytelling with the map added to your stories. So one way would be that you can possibly relate to the location that people are coming from. So the map that you embed would be based on the map of your audience or the location of your audience. The other one would be there are some events that are attached to locations. So your stories would revolve around the maps that are coming from that location and so on. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next video.